I still remember the sound of their laughter. 15 executives in tailored suits, their faces contorted with mockery as I stumbled over my words. The Silicon Valley boardroom felt like it was closing in on me. That day, 5 years ago, they didn't just reject my pitch, they humiliated me. Called my ideas quaint and naive. The CFO actually asked if my mother had helped me with my presentation. I can still feel the heat rising to my face as I gathered my materials, hands shaking, while someone whispered, "Back to the mailroom for this one." That company? Nexus Technologies. Maybe you've heard about what happened to them recently. What they don't know, what none of them know, is that the homeless man they laughed about when I suggested our company create a program to hire people experiencing homelessness. That was my father. And the scholarship program I pitched that made them roll their eyes? It saved my life once. They thought compassion had no place in business. I'm now the CEO of their largest competitor, and I just acquired their failing company for pennies on the dollar. Not for revenge. For something much more powerful. I grew up in Modesto, California, not exactly the tech hub everyone associates with Northern California success stories. My father, Richard Mason, was once a brilliant software engineer who helped develop early networking systems in the 90s. Mom left when I was 4, and for most of my childhood, it was just Dad and me in our small ranch-style house on Carpenter Road. He'd take me to Oakland A's games, taught me to code on our clunky gateway computer, and made sure I knew the difference between Star Wars and Star Trek. Both matter, son, but for different reasons. When I was 12, Dad's company downsized after the dot-com bubble burst. He struggled to find work. Silicon Valley had already started its transformation into the elite playground it is today. Older programmers without Stanford or Berkeley degrees were being pushed out for younger, cheaper talent. Dad started drinking. Not dramatically at first, just a beer after dinner became a six-pack, became whiskey before lunch. By the time I was 15, he'd lost our house. We moved into a one-bedroom apartment in a complex locals called The Palms, though there wasn't a palm tree for miles. Just concrete, chain-link fences, and the constant sound of domestic disputes through paper-thin walls. I remember my sophomore year of high school, Dad managed to pull himself together for my science fair. I'd developed a rudimentary algorithm that could predict agricultural water needs based on seasonal patterns, relevant stuff in California's Central Valley. He wore his one remaining suit, hair combed, sober for 3 days straight. I overheard some parents whispering, "Isn't that Richard Mason?" Thought he was living in his car. My project won first place, but the sting of their judgment followed me home. Things spiraled after that. Dad disappeared for days at a time. I'd find him sometimes at the public library, using their computers to submit job applications, but most days, he was just gone. I started working after school at a local electronics store, paying our rent, buying groceries, keeping the electricity on. By 17, I was essentially living alone. The summer before my senior year, I received a letter. I'd been awarded the Callaway Foundation Scholarship, a program specifically for children of tech workers displaced by industry shifts. Full ride to UC Berkeley. I'll never forget running to the library to tell Dad, only to find him asleep on a bench outside, a security guard about to move him along. That night, I made a promise to myself. I would succeed in the tech world, but I'd never become the kind of person who looked down on those who'd fallen on hard times. At Berkeley I thrive. I double majored in computer science and business administration, interned at promising startups, built a network. Dad would call from various numbers, sometimes coherent, sometimes not. I'd send him money, meet him when I could. The last time I saw him before the Nexus pitch was at a diner in San Francisco's Mission District. He gave me his old Casio watch, the one piece of technology he'd managed to hold onto. "For timing your big presentation," he said. "You're going places, son. Where are you watching this video from? Drop your location in the comments. I'm curious how far this story is traveling." After graduation, I landed at Artemis Ventures, a mid-sized tech firm specializing in enterprise software. I started in product development but quickly moved up to strategy. By 26, I was leading a small team, and our VP of Innovation, Elaine Chin, had taken notice of my work. When Nexus Technologies, one of the Bay Area's fastest-growing companies at the time, announced they were seeking proposals for their social impact initiative, Elaine suggested I put something together. They need to fix their image problem, she said. All these tech companies displacing locals, driving up housing costs. They want ideas that look good in press releases. I spent weeks researching, building financial models, crafting what I believed was more than a PR stunt but an actual solution. My proposal centered on 2 initiatives: a training and hiring program for people experiencing homelessness, teaching them technical and customer service skills, and a scholarship fund for children of displaced tech workers. I knew the economics made sense. The tax benefits alone would offset most costs, not to mention the positive press and employee retention benefits. The morning of the presentation, I couldn't reach Dad. I'd been calling shelters, his occasional friends, leaving messages everywhere. I wanted to tell him about my pitch, about how his struggle had inspired something that might help others. I put on my best suit, not designer, but respectable, and Dad's Casio watch. As I adjusted my tie in the mirror of my studio apartment in Oakland, I felt like I was carrying both our futures into that boardroom. Nexus Technologies' headquarters stood like a gleaming monolith in downtown San Francisco, all glass and brushed steel. The security guard barely looked at me as he handed over my visitor badge. In the elevator, I shared space with executives discussing vacation homes in Napa and private school admissions. I clutched my presentation materials tighter, suddenly aware of the class divide that permeated every inch of the building. The boardroom overlooked the Bay Bridge, a view that probably cost millions in real estate alone. Around the table sat Nexus's leadership team, led by CEO Marcus Whitman, a silver-haired venture capitalist known for his ruthless acquisition strategies. Beside him was CFO Victoria Reeves, whose analytical eyes seemed to calculate my net worth as I set up my presentation. "Mr. Mason, we've allotted you 15 minutes, Whitman said, not looking up from his phone. "We're running behind today." I started strong, presenting market analysis, competitive research, implementation timelines. Then I made what they considered my fatal mistake. I got personal. "This isn't just about numbers," I said. "It's about people. The homeless man you step over on your way to work could be a former engineer. The kid whose family can't afford college could be your next innovator. I've seen both sides of this industry. My father, is this a pitch or a charity appeal?" Victoria interrupted, her voice dripping with disdain. I pushed forward, explaining the financial models. Someone snickered when I mentioned rehabilitation services for homeless hires. "And you know these people can be rehabilitated how, exactly?" asked the head of legal, a man whose name badge read Jonathan Pierce. "Because I've seen it," I responded. "These are often skilled individuals who've experienced setbacks, like your father?" Whitman cut in, leaning forward. "Someone must have Googled me during the presentation. Richard Mason, right? I remember when he was let go from NetSphere. Talented guy who couldn't keep it together. Is this pitch your way of saving Daddy?" The room erupted in poorly concealed laughter. I stood frozen, my carefully constructed professional facade crumbling. "We're not a charity, Mr. Mason," Whitman continued. "We're a business. Your proposal is admirable but naive. Perhaps when you've been in the industry longer, you'll understand the difference between good intentions and good business." As I packed up my materials, Victoria made a show of checking her watch, a Rolex that probably cost more than my annual salary. "If we hired the homeless," she said loud enough for me to hear, "we'd have to reinvent our security protocols." More laughter followed me out the door. In the elevator down, I struggled to maintain composure. In the lobby, my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Your dad at SF General. Bad shape. Come now." If you're finding value in this story, please hit subscribe and like. Help us reach that 1,000 subscriber mark so we can keep bringing you content like this. I rushed to San Francisco General Hospital, my humiliation temporarily overshadowed by panic. Dad had been found unconscious in a doorway in the Tenderloin, suffering from pneumonia and malnutrition. The nurse who'd texted me had found my contact information on a weathered card in his pocket. For 3 days, I barely left his hospital room, working remotely, sleeping in a chair. When he finally stabilized, I used most of my savings to get him into a rehabilitation facility in Oakland, one of the few that accepted patients without insurance. I took a leave of absence from Artemis, split my time between work and helping Dad recover. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was living the very scenario I'd pitched to Nexus. 6 months passed. Dad was making progress, sober, engaged in therapy, even mentoring younger residents with tech backgrounds. I'd been promoted at Artemis, heading a new division focused on sustainable technology. Then came the email that changed everything. Elaine forwarded me a press release. Nexus Technologies was launching their Digital Futures Initiative, a program to train and hire people experiencing homelessness, coupled with a scholarship fund for disadvantaged youth in tech. My proposal, repackaged with Nexus branding, without a word of acknowledgement. That night, I couldn't sleep. The next morning, I discovered that Nexus was hosting a gala to announce their initiative, a black tie affair at the Fairmont Hotel, with tech industry leaders and San Francisco politicians in attendance. I made a decision that would alter the trajectory of my career and life. I called in every favor I had accumulated in the industry. A former classmate who now worked at TechCrunch agreed to cover whatever happened. A friend at Artemis helped me secure an invitation. I even reached out to 3 former Nexus employees who'd been laid off during restructuring, who provided invaluable internal information. The night of the gala arrived. I wore my best suit, now designer, thanks to my promotion, and Dad's Casio watch. The Fairmont's ballroom glittered with wealth and influence. At the center of it all stood Marcus Whitman, accepting congratulations for his company's groundbreaking social initiative. I waited until the formal presentation began. Whitman took the stage, speaking passionately about corporate responsibility and second chances. Victoria Reeves followed with projections of tax benefits and positive PR valuation, my exact figures. When they opened the floor for questions, I raised my hand. A server handed me a microphone. "Congratulations on the initiative," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm curious about the inspiration behind it." Whitman smiled. "We at Nexus believe in innovation in all forms. This program represents our commitment to the community that supports us." "Interesting," I replied. "Because this program, down to the implementation timeline and financial projections, is identical to the proposal I presented to your board exactly 1 year ago. The same proposal your team called naive and unrealistic." The room quieted. I continued, walking slowly toward the stage. "What changed, Mr. Whitman? Was it when 3 of your executives were photographed stepping over a homeless veteran to enter your building? Or when your Q2 earnings showed you losing market share to companies with stronger social responsibility profiles?" Victoria stepped forward. "Security, please." "No need," I said. "I'm leaving." But first, I turned to address the room, where I now noticed several journalists recording. "The man you rejected and mocked in that boardroom? His father was the homeless engineer I wanted to help. He's now in recovery, helping others rebuild their lives without corporate support. Meanwhile, you're using his suffering as a PR opportunity." I placed the microphone on a nearby table and walked toward the exit. Behind me, I heard Whitman attempting damage control, but the murmurs had already begun spreading through the crowd. Outside, my phone lit up with notifications as the TechCrunch reporter published the first version of what would become a viral story. Nexus Technologies accused of stealing social impact program from rejected applicant. The most satisfying sound wasn't their gasps or Whitman sputtering. It was the silence that followed me out the door. The silence of people who suddenly realized they'd been exposed. The fallout was swift and merciless. By morning, #NexusTheft was trending on Twitter. Former employees emerged with similar stories. Ideas appropriated, credit stolen, the toxic culture of Silicon Valley's darling exposed. TechCrunch's article was picked up by mainstream outlets. Within days, Nexus stock dropped 15%. My phone rang constantly, journalists, industry insiders, even competitors wanting to distance themselves from Nexus's practices. Artemis placed me on paid leave, concerned about association, but their board chair privately messaged, "Well played. Let the dust settle." 3 days after the gala, I received an unexpected call from Eleanor Voss, founder of Horizon Innovations, one of Silicon Valley's few female-led unicorns. "I need someone who understands both technology and humanity," she said, "and who isn't afraid to speak truth to power. When can you start?" I accepted her offer to lead Horizon's new social impact division, with one condition: I would implement my original program, hiring Dad as a consultant. He'd become something of an expert on homelessness in tech, having lived it. Within 6 months, we'd hired 35 people from various shelters and rehabilitation centers, many former industry professionals who'd fallen on hard times. Meanwhile, Nexus was imploding. An internal investigation revealed other ethical breaches. Marcus Whitman resigned under pressure from the board. Victoria Reeves followed shortly after. Their stock continued its downward spiral as clients and partners distanced themselves. A year into my role at Horizon, Eleanor called me into her office. "Nexus is on life support," she said. "Their board is looking for acquisition offers. I think we should make one." The irony wasn't lost on me. Why would we want a company with their reputation? Because beneath the toxic leadership, they have talented teams and valuable IP. And because it would be poetic justice for you to lead the rebuild. Her eyes twinkled. Think about it. You could implement your vision throughout their organization. After careful consideration and due diligence, Horizon acquired Nexus Technologies at a fraction of its former valuation. I was named transitional CEO of the subsidiary, tasked with integrating it into Horizon's more ethical culture. The day I walked into the Nexus boardroom, the same room where I'd been humiliated as their new leader, was surreal. Some employees looked anxious, others hopeful. "I'm not here for revenge," I told them at the all-hands meeting. "I'm here because I believe in second chances, for companies as well as people." My first official act was to establish the Richard Mason Technical Reentry Program, named after my father, who now served on its advisory board. My second was to review every rejected proposal from the past 5 years, looking for other stolen or dismissed innovations. The most unexpected consequence came 6 months after the acquisition. While reviewing old Nexus files, I discovered something shocking, a buried research report showing that Richard Mason hadn't been laid off during the dot-com bust as we'd always believed. He'd been deliberately pushed out after raising ethical concerns about user data practices. His supervisor at the time? A young Marcus Whitman, in his first executive role. When I confronted Dad with this information, he sighed heavily. I suspected but could never prove it. After I questioned their data collection methods, suddenly my performance reviews tanked. They blacklisted me throughout the industry. I couldn't fight them, no money for lawyers, and who'd believe the alcoholic over the rising star? This revelation transformed my understanding of our family history. Dad's downward spiral hadn't been just bad luck or the economy, it had been orchestrated. The watch he'd given me, his prized possession, had been a reminder of his ethical stand, though he'd never said so explicitly. With Dad's permission, I made this information public as part of Horizon's transparency initiative. The industry response was overwhelming. More former employees came forward with similar stories about early unethical practices. What began as personal vindication expanded into an industry-wide reckoning about Silicon Valley's cutthroat culture. 2 years after the acquisition, our social impact division had placed over 200 formerly homeless individuals in tech positions, with a 78% retention rate. The scholarship program had funded education for 150 students. Horizon's stock had doubled, proving that ethics and profitability weren't mutually exclusive. Dad continued his recovery, moved into his own apartment, and became a sought-after speaker on tech ethics and homelessness. We still went to Oakland A's games, but now we sat in much better seats. The most satisfying moment came during a tech conference in 2023. I was delivering a keynote on ethical leadership when I spotted Victoria Reeves in the audience. After my speech, she approached me, visibly uncomfortable. "Your program," she said stiffly. "It's impressive. I was wrong about it. And about you." I extended my hand. "Thank you for saying that. Would you like to tour our training center sometime? See the impact firsthand?" She accepted, and 3 months later, joined our advisory board as a volunteer. People can change. Sometimes they just need the right example. Today, as I sit in my office overlooking San Francisco Bay, not so different from the view in that Nexus boardroom years ago, I wear Dad's Casio watch as a reminder. Not of humiliation or even triumph, but of integrity. The watch keeps perfect time, just as it did when he first gave it to me. Some technologies don't need constant upgrading to serve their purpose faithfully. What happened wasn't about revenge, though many have framed it that way. It was about restoration of my father's dignity, of my own confidence, and of some measure of ethical balance in an industry too often defined by its cutthroat practices. The grand gesture I'd once pitched to uninterested executives has now helped hundreds of people rebuild their lives. The scholarship program has created opportunities for students who might otherwise have been left behind. The greatest lesson I've learned is that true innovation isn't just about technology, it's about humanity. The algorithms and platforms we build are only as good as the values they embody and the lives they improve. In our rush toward the future, we can't afford to discard people along the way. I recently asked Dad what he would say to his younger self, standing at that crossroads where his career began to unravel. I'd tell him he was right to stand his ground, he said, and that his son was watching even when he didn't realize it. Perhaps that's the most unexpected twist in this story, that my father's greatest legacy wasn't the code he wrote in his prime, but the example he set in his darkest hours. His refusal to compromise his ethics, even when it cost him everything, planted a seed that would eventually grow into something neither of us could have imagined. If there's something in your life that seems like a devastating setback, a rejection, a humiliation, a loss, remember that you never know how the story ends from the middle. The same people who dismiss you today may find themselves working for you tomorrow. Not because you sought revenge, but because you stayed true to your vision when they couldn't see it. If this story resonated with you, please hit the subscribe button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. We're building a community here that believes in second chances and ethical leadership. Your comments and experiences help us know we're not alone in this journey. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't getting even, it's moving forward with purpose.